In the vast silence of space, where stars burned like distant candles, a cry for help broke through the emptiness. It was a single transmission, weak and desperate, from a colony no one had heard much about. The colony sat on the very edge of the Orion Arm, a place so far from the centers of power that many in the galaxy considered it unimportant. But to the people living there, it was home. And now that home was under attack. The voice in the message trembled with fear. It spoke of alien warships descending from the void, weapons tearing through defenses, families hiding underground, and children crying in fear. The distress call was short, raw, and filled with panic. It was the kind of cry that could reach into the heart of anyone willing to listen. The Council of Worlds received the message first. Representatives of ancient empires gathered to discuss it, but their response was cold. To them, it was just another border clash, another small settlement caught between stronger powers. They argued that sending fleets to defend every tiny colony would waste resources. Some even laughed, saying the colony should have known better than to settle so close to dangerous space. They silenced the channel, their attention shifting back to trade agreements and political games. The cry for help was dismissed, forgotten by those who claimed to rule the stars. But signals travel far, and this one reached Earth. On board the human starship Liberty, Captain Daniel Harris was reviewing patrol reports when the signal broke into his console. At first, he thought it was an error, the voice almost too faint to make sense. But when the words became clear, he froze. He listened again and again, hearing the pain and terror in every sentence. He could almost picture the colony burning, families clutching each other in dark shelters, and alien soldiers marching through broken streets. For him, this was not just another distant war. It was a test. Daniel Harris was not the kind of man to turn away from suffering. He was a career officer, calm under pressure, but known for making bold choices that sometimes worried his superiors. Many called him reckless, but to his crew, he was the kind of leader who made them believe they could do the impossible. As he listened to the call, he made a decision. Earth might not have been asked to help, the Council might not care, but humanity would not remain silent. They had been ignored by the galaxy for too long, dismissed as young and unimportant. Now, with one desperate cry, they had been given a chance to show who they really were. The crew of the Liberty soon gathered in the command room. Officers leaned over glowing displays, engineers whispered about readiness checks, and pilots sat at attention, waiting for orders. Harris stood before them, his face lit by the soft blue light of the holographic map showing the colony under attack. He spoke with firm conviction, telling them of the signal, of the danger, and of the choice that lay before them. He reminded them that humanity had always answered cries of desperation, whether on Earth in times of disaster or now among the stars. He promised that their journey would not just be about firing weapons, but about carrying hope to people who had none. Some crew members exchanged nervous glances. The Liberty was a fine ship, strong and well-armed, but she was only one vessel. Facing an entire alien warband could mean suicide. Yet when Harris finished speaking, silence filled the room for a heartbeat. Then the crew erupted into determined voices. They were not afraid of the challenge. They were ready to follow their captain, not because of orders, but because they believed in the mission. The hangar bay buzzed with energy. Engineers checked reactor coils, tightened weapon mounts, and recalibrated shield arrays. Drones carried ammunition to launch bays, and repair crews worked through the night, making sure every system was perfect. Pilots climbed into their sleek fighters, running their own checks, whispering to each other about what lay ahead. The Liberty had always been a ship of steel and circuitry, but now it pulsed with something stronger, the will of its people. Beyond Earth, whispers began to spread. Civilian communication channels lit up as word of the distress call leaked. On space stations orbiting Mars and Jupiter, workers debated what would happen next. Some feared humanity was about to step into a conflict that was not theirs. Others clenched their fists and said, it was about time Earth showed the galaxy its strength. Volunteers began sending messages, offering their own ships, their own skills, their own courage to the cause. Humanity was stirring, and it started with one man's refusal to look away. As the Liberty prepared to depart, Captain Harris stood once more at the viewing deck. The planet Earth shone below, blue and fragile, cradling the billions of lives he swore to protect. He thought of those faraway colonists, strangers to him, yet bound to him by the simple fact of shared desperation. He thought of the Council of Worlds, their polished halls and cold words, and how they would soon learn what humanity truly meant. He thought of the journey ahead, of battles yet to come, and of the choice that defined them, to act when others did not. When the engines roared to life, the Liberty did not just leave orbit, it carried with it the weight of a promise whispered in every heartbeat of the crew, in every spark of the reactors, in every gleam of the weapons, that no cry for help would ever be ignored if humanity heard it. The ship turned toward the distant stars, toward the colony crying out for rescue, and with a single jump into the void, humanity's story in the galaxy began to change forever. The news of the colony's distress call reached Earth like a spark falling into dry grass. It spread fast, igniting anger, sorrow, and a fierce determination among people who had always been underestimated by the greater galaxy. The Council might have dismissed it, but Earth did not. President Laura Bennett stood before the United Nations of Earth in a chamber crowded with leaders, military officers, and ordinary citizens watching the broadcast. Her voice carried a fire that could not be ignored as she declared that humanity would not turn its back on those in need. She spoke of honor, of duty, and of the responsibility that came with strength. The words stirred millions, and suddenly the whole planet seemed to breathe with the same purpose. Civilian volunteers signed up in waves. Retired pilots dusted off their flight suits, eager to serve once more. Engineers who had spent years designing mining ships suddenly found themselves sketching plans to retrofit them into warcraft. Private ship owners came forward, willing to donate their freighters and transports if it meant saving innocent lives. What had started as one starship's mission began to transform into something much larger. People whispered about it in cafes on Earth, in domed colonies on Mars, and in crowded stations orbiting Saturn. It wasn't just an operation anymore, it was a movement. The Liberty soon found itself no longer alone. The Endeavour, a heavy cruiser with a seasoned crew, pledged to join Captain Harris. The Horizon, a fast and agile ship known for daring captains, fell into formation at Harris's request. Then came the Pathfinder, a vessel famous for its drone networks, its commander offering everything it had to the mission. In just weeks, a fleet was forming, not the product of bureaucracy, but of human will. No other species in the galaxy had ever mobilized so quickly, so passionately, in response to a call for help. Within the corridors of the Liberty, the change was felt in every corner. Supply rooms filled with crates of donated equipment from civilian factories. Mess halls rang with the voices of new recruits sitting beside veterans, all united by a single cause. Pilots trained endlessly, practicing maneuvers not in simulators designed for war, but in rigs borrowed from racing leagues and cargo haulers. Yet their creativity and raw determination turned even those into powerful tools. Humanity was improvising, adapting, and moving with a speed that bewildered even their own allies. President Bennett met personally with the captains of the growing fleet before they departed. She did not give them a polished speech of politics. Instead, she reminded them of something simple, that every child hiding in the colony's ruins, every family praying for rescue was depending on them. She said that their actions would speak louder than any council resolution, and that humanity would be judged not by its power, but by its courage. Her words settled deep into the hearts of those who listened, fueling the determination already burning within them. Around the galaxy, rumors began to swirl. Traders spoke of humans raising fleets almost overnight. Spies reported the strange unity of a species known for their arguments and divisions. Other worlds scoffed, saying it was impossible that humanity lacked the discipline of older empires. But some began to worry. If humans could mobilize this quickly for a colony of strangers, what would they do if their own worlds were threatened? What might happen if Earth turned its full strength outward? Inside the Liberty's war room, holographic maps glowed as captains and officers gathered. They planned their approach, charted supply lines, and argued over tactics. Yet even in those arguments, there was energy, a sense of something greater. They weren't just preparing for a battle. They were preparing to make a statement that would echo across the stars. When the ships finally aligned in formation, engines humming, weapons armed, and crews ready, the fleet did not resemble the cold, mechanical armadas of the old empires. It looked alive. Each ship carried not only soldiers, but volunteers, adventurers, and people who had chosen to risk everything because they could not stand by. Humanity had been overlooked for centuries, treated as newcomers with little influence. But now, as the Liberty led the way, the galaxy began to sense that something had changed. Humanity had answered one cry of desperation, and in doing so, it had awakened a force no one had expected. The fleet's journey toward Orion's edge was not smooth. Alien scouts appeared in their path, swift ships designed to delay and probe, testing the humans' resolve. The Horizon, under Commander Marcus Cole, took point. Cole had a reputation for bold maneuvers, and he lived up to it when he led his ships straight into a dense asteroid belt rather than retreat. The alien ships followed, confident in their superior technology, but they soon learned that humans played by different rules. The Horizon weaved between tumbling rocks with reckless precision, using the asteroids as both cover and weapons. Cole ordered his gunners to fire at unstable boulders, sending debris crashing into the enemy. It was not a tactic written in any manual, but it worked. Alien ships were smashed apart by the very asteroids they thought were harmless. Watching from the Liberty, Captain Harris allowed himself a brief smile. Humanity was proving once again that creativity in the face of danger was its greatest weapon. When the alien formation regrouped, the Liberty unleashed its rail cannons. The kinetic rounds, accelerated to unbelievable speeds, tore through enemy shields as if they were paper. Alien commanders had never faced such weapons before, their doctrines unprepared for the sheer brutality of human firepower. The shock rippled through their fleet. To them, humans were supposed to be undisciplined and weak, yet here they were turning unpredictability into dominance. The Pathfinder released swarms of drones, small machines darting through space like a storm of hornets. They jammed enemy sensors, cut through communications, and overloaded defenses. Pilots inside enemy cockpits found themselves blinded by flashes of static and surrounded by tiny machines that moved too fast to target. Panic spread as their formations fell apart. It was not just the strength of human weapons, but the way they used them, adapting mid-battle, exploiting every weakness with merciless precision. Inside the Liberty's command deck, the crew felt the weight of the moment. Every time an enemy ship exploded in the distance, cheers rose, but there was no arrogance. They knew they were still outnumbered, still deep in hostile space. Yet fear had been replaced by determination. They were no longer fighting only to answer a distress call. They were fighting to show that humanity would not be pushed aside. Alien resistance grew fiercer as reinforcements arrived, but even then the humans refused to back down. Cole drove the Horizon dangerously close to enemy cruisers, forcing them to turn their weapons inward. Harris kept the Liberty at the center, acting as both shield and sword, drawing fire while delivering devastating counterstrikes. The Endeavor unleashed a wave of missiles, their trails crisscrossing the void in a deadly web that cut through enemy lines. The alien commander, frustrated and bewildered, tried to adapt. Orders were barked, formations tightened, and strategies adjusted. Yet every time, the humans did something unexpected. They used asteroid shadows to mask their engines, they spun freighters into makeshift decoys, and they overloaded their reactors to squeeze out bursts of impossible speed. What seemed like chaos was in fact controlled madness, a style of warfare alien minds could not comprehend. By the end of the battle, the alien blockade meant to halt the human advance was broken. Wreckage drifted in silence, glowing with sparks from shattered hulls. The human fleet had taken losses, but their victory was undeniable. What shocked the observers most was not the destruction left behind, but the realization that humans had fought not like any known empire, but like something entirely new. Recklessness had become strategy. Desperation had become strength. As the fleet reformed and continued toward Orion's edge, the message was clear. The galaxy had long believed humans to be untested and fragile, but now whispers spread through surviving enemy channels. They spoke of unpredictability, of weapons that should not have worked but did, of captains who threw themselves into danger without hesitation. For the first time, alien soldiers looked at human ships with unease. The galaxy had underestimated Earth, and in the trails of fire left behind, it was beginning to tremble. The colony's skies burned red as enemy warships circled above like predators waiting for the kill. On the ground, survivors huddled in shattered bunkers, their hope fading with every explosion. Just as the alien warband prepared to deliver the final strike, the human fleet burst from warp, engines blazing like a sudden storm. The Liberty took the lead, its rail cannons lighting up the void with thunderous fire. Captain Harris gave no time for hesitation. His orders were sharp and relentless, driving his crew into the heart of battle. The Pathfinder's drones swarmed first, a cloud of metallic insects darting through space. They crashed into enemy shields, disrupting their systems, carving openings where none should exist. The Endeavor followed, unleashing missile salvos that curved and twisted, guided by human ingenuity. Explosions rippled through the enemy formation, breaking their tight circle into fragments. The Horizon, fast and fearless, slipped into the gaps, striking from angles the aliens could not anticipate. From orbit, colonists who thought they had been abandoned looked up to see streaks of light ripping through the enemy. Whispers spread in the shelters. Humans came. For them, the sudden sight of Earth ships was like a miracle, hope reborn from ashes. Parents clutched their children tighter, not with despair but with relief, as the sound of explosions above turned from terror into salvation. Alien commanders roared in frustration, throwing everything they had into crushing the newcomers. Massive cruisers opened fire, beams slicing across space with deadly precision. The Liberty shuddered as blasts tore across its shields, but Harris refused to pull back. Instead, he ordered his ship forward, closer to the enemy flagship. "If they want to break us, let them try," he growled, and his crew responded with unwavering resolve. The Horizon dove into the shadow of an enemy destroyer, its guns blazing point blank, shredding armor from within arm's reach. The Pathfinder's drones overloaded reactors on another cruiser, forcing it to erupt in a violent chain reaction that rocked half the battlefield. The Endeavor's missile strikes carved corridors of fire, cutting enemy formations apart. Every ship fought not for glory, but for the desperate lives clinging to survival below. Inside the Liberty's bridge, alarms screamed, sparks flew, but no one faltered. Officers shouted coordinates, gunners locked targets, and engineers rerouted failing systems. Sweat dripped from brows, but their determination burned hotter than fear. They were not fighting strangers' war. They were protecting a cry for help that had reached their ears, and that was enough. On the colony's surface, alien ground troops faltered. Their leaders had promised easy conquest, but now their fleet above was breaking apart. Soldiers hesitated as human fighters streaked through the skies, tearing apart dropships and escort craft. Colonists, once resigned to death, began to rise from hiding, their courage fueled by the sight of humanity standing for them. The enemy flagship made a desperate push, rallying its remaining forces, but Harris had been waiting for it. The Liberty surged forward, its cannons glowing with deadly charge. "All guns, fire!" he commanded, and the ship roared in answer. Round after round tore into the flagship until its shields collapsed, and one final railgun shot ripped straight through its core. The explosion lit the battlefield like a new star, signaling the end of the blockade. Silence followed, broken only by cheers echoing through human comms. The colony was saved. For the survivors who had thought themselves forgotten, humanity had proven otherwise. The warband was scattered, their arrogance shattered by an enemy they never expected. For the first time in their history, humans had fought not for themselves, but for others, and in doing so, they had shaken the balance of power across the stars. The council chamber glittered with marble floors and banners of ancient empires, but the air inside was heavy with unease. Reports of the battle at Orion's Edge filled the hall, each one confirming what many had refused to believe. The humans had crushed a warband with a force assembled in weeks. Ambassadors leaned forward in their seats, their voices sharp with disbelief and fear. Some insisted it was a fluke, that Earth's victory was nothing more than luck. Others warned that no species should have been able to mobilize with such speed and precision. The word impossible was whispered more than once, yet the wreckage of alien ships told another story. Diplomats from older powers bristled. The Zaran Dominion accused humanity of upsetting the fragile balance of the galaxy, Representatives of the Thrin Empire demanded sanctions, claiming Earth had no authority to interfere in conflicts beyond its borders. Yet, even as they shouted, there was a tremor in their voices. None of them had expected humans to stand against a professional warband and emerge victorious. None of them had expected Earth's fleet to arrive at all. Behind the formal speeches, private conversations turned darker. Spies whispered that humanity's fleets were growing larger by the day. Merchants told tales of volunteers lining up at recruitment offices, of private industries retooling factories overnight to build weapons and starships. Leaders of ancient empires, secure in their superiority for centuries, found themselves asking dangerous questions. If humans could answer one cry for help with such force, what would happen if they chose to fight for their own interests? Not all voices in the chamber spoke against Earth. The ambassador from a smaller colony world, whose people had often been ignored by the Council, rose to defend the humans. He reminded the chamber that while the Council had debated endlessly, humanity had acted. While others turned away from the distress call, humans had risked their lives for strangers. His words drew murmurs of agreement from representatives of oppressed systems who had long grown tired of the Council's inaction. To them, Earth was no longer just another young species. It was hope. The Council High Speaker tried to calm the storm, but the chamber was divided. Old empires demanded restrictions, younger worlds whispered about alliances, and everywhere, unease spread like wildfire. For centuries, humanity had been dismissed as too small to matter. Now, after one battle, they had become the most talked about species in the galaxy. In hidden corners of the chamber, emissaries from rival factions leaned close to each other, exchanging nervous calculations. Some spoke of crushing humanity before it grew stronger, while others plotted to win Earth's friendship before it was too late. No decision was made that day, but one truth lingered in every mind. The galaxy had shifted. The cry for help from a forgotten colony had not just saved lives, it had exposed humanity's power, and the tremor it sent through the Council would not fade. Analysts pored over the combat logs with disbelief, replaying the battles again and again. On paper, human ships should have been outclassed. They were smaller, with thinner armor and fewer energy reserves. Yet the recordings showed railgun rounds slicing clean through enemy cruisers, swarm drones overwhelming sensor arrays, and shield systems shifting frequency faster than alien computers could track. The technology was crude compared to the polished designs of older empires, but it worked with terrifying efficiency. It wasn't elegance that won the day, it was ingenuity. Engineers from rival powers argued late into the night, trying to understand how humans had achieved such results in so little time. Railguns were considered outdated, too primitive compared to energy weapons, yet humanity had pushed them to extremes no one else had thought possible. Their kinetic impact shredded advanced shielding, bypassing systems designed for plasma and lasers. The drones baffled technicians even more. They weren't masterpieces of engineering, but simple machines built cheaply and deployed in swarms. What others called disposable, humans turned into a weapon that changed the course of battles. Even the shields of Earth's fleet raised alarms. Instead of rigid, pre-programmed defenses, human shields adapted in real time, bending to enemy attacks, twisting to absorb unexpected strikes. It was as if the ships themselves were thinking, adjusting mid-battle in ways no alien fleet could match. Reports suggested that human crews weren't afraid to override safety limits, pushing reactors beyond design thresholds, trading risk for survival. To many, this was insanity. To humanity, it was survival instinct, refined into doctrine. Whispers spread through the galaxy's academies. Necessity had driven humans to innovate faster than anyone else. On Earth, disasters, wars, and crises had forced them to invent under pressure for centuries. That same desperation now echoed in their starships. Where others perfected tradition, humans thrived on breaking rules. Their science was not neat or polished, but it was relentless. Every setback became a lesson, every shortage a reason to improvise, every battle a forge for something new. Alien commanders who once laughed at Earth now stared at their reports with unease. If humans could twist simple railguns and drones into weapons of terror, what would they do with time, resources, and allies? Could any empire stand against an enemy that saw limits not as boundaries, but as challenges? What had begun as curiosity turned to fear. No one could deny it now. Humanity's technology was not just different, it was dangerous because it carried the spirit of a people who refused to lose. The rescued colonists stepped out of ruined shelters, blinking at the sunlight that finally touched their faces without the shadow of enemy warships overhead. They were not only humans, but a mixture of species the Council had long ignored: miners, farmers, traders, families who had been left to fend for themselves. When the first colonists realized it was Earth's fleet that had saved them, their gratitude turned into something deeper. They gathered before Captain Harris and his crew, swearing loyalty not just with words, but with promises of alliance. Humanity, once dismissed as insignificant, had become a beacon for those abandoned by the great empires. Word spread quickly across nearby systems. Captains of smaller fleets, tired of being bullied by stronger powers, approached Commander Elena Brooks of the Endeavour. She had a reputation for sharp negotiation, and under her guidance, treaties were drawn not in marble halls but in the mess decks of human ships. These agreements were not built on politics or wealth, but on shared survival. Colonies that had lived in fear began to see Earth as a shield, not a distant newcomer. The Pathfinder carried rescued children to safety, its hangars filled with laughter instead of silence for the first time in weeks. The Horizon escorted damaged freighters back to safer routes. Its crew cheered as heroes in settlements that had never before seen protection arrive so quickly. Everywhere the fleet went, they left behind not just relief, but trust. Humanity had acted where the Council had failed, and that difference began to reshape the map of loyalties in the galaxy. Smaller worlds, once afraid to speak against their overlords, began sending envoys to Earth. These envoys did not arrive demanding aid. They came offering it. Supplies, fighters, engineers, and even starships were pledged to the growing alliance. They saw in humanity a species willing to fight not for conquest, but for the desperate, and that was something worth following. Old empires, watching from afar, began to grow uneasy as their subjects whispered of defection. Captain Harris, walking among the colonists, felt the shift with every handshake and every promise spoken. He had not set out to build an alliance, only to answer a cry for help, yet the galaxy itself was responding. People once divided by language, biology, and history were rallying around a single truth: humanity cared when others did not. The fleet that had begun with a handful of ships was now becoming something larger, something unstoppable. In the stars above, banners of different worlds began to fly beside Earth's own insignia. A coalition was forming, not of fear, not of dominance, but of shared strength. Humanity had proven itself with blood and fire, and now the forgotten peoples of the galaxy were ready to follow their lead. The alliances sealed in those weeks were the first cracks in the old order, and through them, the future was already pouring in. President Laura Bennett stood before the Council, her presence commanding silence in a chamber that had once dismissed humanity as insignificant. The banners of ancient empires hung heavy around her, but she was not intimidated. Her voice carried across the hall, steady and sharp, as she declared that Earth would no longer watch from the sidelines while innocents begged for help. Humanity had acted when the Council would not, and the galaxy had seen the difference. The Council delegates shifted uncomfortably, some glaring, others whispering in private channels, but none could deny the truth. Reports of the battle at Orion's Edge had spread everywhere. Images of human ships shielding a colony, of drones cutting through warbands, of railguns tearing open cruisers, had become symbols of defiance. Even the species that had once mocked Earth now spoke of them with wary respect. The room trembled not from Bennett's words alone, but from the knowledge that humanity had already proven them real. Beyond the council chamber, the fleets of Earth were multiplying. Shipyards that once built freighters now churned out warships. Civilian volunteers still lined up. Industries pushed themselves to exhaustion, and every system of humanity contributed to the effort. Allies from smaller colonies added their banners, their crews, their trust. What had begun as one desperate mission had grown into a movement spanning worlds. The stars themselves seemed to flicker with the trails of ships gathering under Earth's call. Bennett's final words echoed like a strike of iron. When cries for help reach us, humanity will answer. If you cannot understand that, then you should understand this: we will not stop. The silence that followed was not weakness, but fear. Ancient empires, once confident in their dominance, now measured their strength against a species that refused to bow. In the void of space, the Liberty led formation drills beside its allies, its hull still scarred from battle, but its crew standing taller than ever. Colonists waved from station windows as the fleet passed, not just at human ships, but at the growing coalition that followed them. Where once there had been despair, there was now fire. The cry of one desperate colony had awakened a force that would not return to silence. The galaxy, for all its power and arrogance, now understood the truth. Humanity did not need permission to act, and when they chose to move, they moved with a speed and ferocity that shattered the old balance. In every council chamber, in every military outpost, and in every whisper among common people, the same thought took root. If humanity had mobilized for strangers, what storm would come if they fought for themselves? The tremor of fear had become a quake, and as Earth's fleets filled the stars, empires old and mighty began to tremble.